It had been 3 months since I moved into the upstairs unit of her duplex. We'd had the usual polite exchanges, rent envelopes, packages left by the wrong door, a quick morning in the driveway. She was mid-40s, maybe older, but carried herself like she didn't care who guessed. There was something about her, some unpolished steadiness, that made you notice, even when you pretended not to. That morning, it rained. Light but steady. My shift didn't start until noon, so I walked to the corner cafe. I'd barely stepped inside when I saw her at the counter, talking to the barista like they'd known each other for years. She noticed me over her shoulder. "You're up early," she said. "Guess so," I replied, stepping up beside her. She tilted her head toward my hands. "You forgot an umbrella." I glanced down, water beading on my jacket, dripping to the floor. "Yeah. Rookie mistake." Her coffee arrived, black, no sugar. She slid $1 into the tip jar without looking, then stepped aside so I could order. The barista smirked. "Your usual." I nodded, and as he rang it up, I heard her say, "I didn't know you were a regular here." "I'm not," I lied. It earned me a small, knowing smile. We ended up at the same corner table without planning it, her with a paperback she didn't open, me with my phone face down on the table. Conversation started slow, about the weather, about how the roof groaned in heavy rain. I found myself watching the way she rested her thumb along the rim of her mug, how she tapped it once before taking a sip. "You live upstairs," she said, almost like a question. I nodded. "You live downstairs." That made her laugh, a short, surprised sound, like she didn't expect to find it funny. We fell into a pause. Not uncomfortable, just still. The cafe clock ticked in the background. She broke it by leaning back in her chair and saying, "It's been a long time since I've felt wanted." I didn't think about my answer. I just said, "You are." Her eyes flicked to mine, quick, then away, as if the words had been heavier than she expected. She took a slow sip of coffee, then set it down like she was afraid of making a sound. We didn't speak much after that. When she stood to leave, she gave me a look I couldn't place, half gratitude, half warning. The bell over the door rang as she stepped into the rain. I stayed there for another half hour, stirring a coffee I'd already finished. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I ignored it. When I finally checked, it was a text from her. "If you're around later, come by. I have something for you." I didn't move for a while. Just sat there, thumb resting over the reply button, wondering if I'd already crossed some invisible line. By the time I got to her door that evening, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried it, that damp heaviness that makes wood smell older. She opened the door before I knocked. "You're late," she said, but her voice wasn't sharp. "I didn't know it was timed," I replied. "You'll learn." She stepped back to let me in. The downstairs unit was warmer than I expected, not in temperature, but in feeling. The furniture didn't match, the walls held frames of different sizes, and the whole place smelled faintly of ginger and something floral. On the kitchen table sat a small plate covered with foil. "Banana bread," she said. "Don't get used to it." I took the plate, peeled the foil back. "Is this the thing you had for me?" She gave a small shrug. "I had extras. And I don't like wasting things." We sat at the table with tea, hers chamomile, mine black. She rested her elbows on the table, fingers loosely wrapped around the mug. I noticed she didn't drink right away, just let the steam rise to her face like she wanted to feel it before tasting. "You said something earlier," she began, looking at the rim of her cup instead of me. "At the cafe." I swallowed a bite of banana bread. "Yeah. You meant it?" I nodded. "Yeah. Her eyes lifted then, quick, searching. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. It's been a long time since I let myself hear that. There was a pause, and I let it sit. She filled it herself. My ex, he made it easy to forget I mattered. 20 years of that can make a person quiet. I wanted to say something, but my mouth stayed shut. Instead, I focused on the sound of the kettle clicking as it cooled, the way her left hand traced the edge of the mug when she was thinking. You're what, 25? She asked. 22, I corrected. That earned me a dry smile. Even worse. Does it matter? Her eyes didn't answer, but the silence did. We stayed at the table for another hour, talking about small things, how she once wanted to live by the ocean, how I used to watch my dad make coffee at 5 a.m. before work. None of it sounded like a confession, but somehow it felt like one. When I stood to leave, she followed me to the door. I handed her the empty plate, and for a moment, our fingers brushed. Not the accidental kind, the kind that lingers a heartbeat too long to be nothing. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. For a week, I didn't see her. The blind still opened at 7:10, but I only caught glimpses, a shoulder passing by the window, her hand sliding the lock. No coffee shop run-ins. No texts. Then Thursday, she knocked on my door. 3 short taps. Your rent check, she said, holding it out. You forgot to sign it. I reached for it. Our fingers didn't touch this time. Thanks, I said, but she lingered at the doorway. You busy? No, she glanced past me, into the apartment, not prying, just checking. I'm making soup. Too much for one person. Downstairs, the kitchen light was softer than I remembered. She moved around it like she'd already decided I belonged there, setting out a second bowl, nudging the chair with her hip so I'd sit. I watched her ladle the soup. The way she kept her eyes down. Something was different, like she was holding herself at arm's length even while standing right in front of me. You've been scarce, I said. She shrugged. Busy. The word felt like a wall. I didn't push. Halfway through eating, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then turned it face down without answering. I caught the faint crease between her brows before it disappeared. Friend? I asked. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Ex. He thinks we can be civil now. The way she said civil made it sound like a bruise. We fell quiet again. The only sound was the slow clink of spoons against bowls. My knee brushed hers under the table, not hard, not even intentional, but neither of us moved it right away. Then the doorbell rang. Her eyes flicked to mine, then to the clock. She didn't move at first, like she was deciding whether to answer. Finally, she stood, smoothing her sweater. Stay here. I listened to the muffled voice at the door, male, older. Couldn't make out the words. Her voice was low, steady, but the edge in it wasn't there before. After a minute, the door closed, and she came back. Wrong address, she said too quickly. I didn't believe her, but I didn't ask. We finished eating in slower bites. When she stood to clear the table, I reached for the bowls at the same time she did. My hand closed over hers. She froze, not startled, just caught. For a second, the room felt too small. Her eyes dropped to my mouth, then back up. My pulse jumped. I think I leaned forward, just slightly, before she stepped back. It's late, she said. It wasn't. It was Saturday evening, still warm enough for the air to smell faintly of cut grass. I was taking the trash out when I saw her sitting on the low brick wall in front of the duplex, a mug cradled in both hands. "Long day?" I asked. She glanced up, half smiling. "Just a day." I sat beside her. Close enough to feel the heat from her arm, not close enough to touch. She sipped whatever was in her mug, tea, maybe wine, I couldn't tell, and didn't fill the silence right away. Finally, she said, "I saw you talking to that girl yesterday. The one with the red jacket." I thought about it. "Maya. She's in my class." She seemed interested. The way she said it wasn't teasing. It was too careful, like she was trying to keep her voice from bending. "She's just a friend," I said. She nodded, eyes fixed on the dark street. "I know it's none of my business. But it felt like it was. And maybe that's why I answered without thinking. Would it bother you if she wasn't?" Her grip tightened on the mug. "It might," she said quietly. We stayed like that, the air heavy but still, until she set the mug down on the wall beside her. "You're easy to be around," she said, almost like she was confessing a fault. "Too easy. And I forget the part where I shouldn't be." I let that sit for a moment. "Why shouldn't you be?" "Because I'm me," she said, with a small laugh that didn't sound like laughter at all. "And you're not supposed to notice me this way." "I already do," I said. She turned then, fully, and I felt the shift, the way her eyes softened and sharpened at the same time. She looked like someone who wanted to step closer but couldn't trust her own feet. "I don't know what you want from me," she said, voice low. "Maybe I just want to be here," I replied. She exhaled slowly, almost a sigh. Her hand rested on the wall between us, fingers just close enough that I could reach out if I dared. I thought about it, about closing that space, but something in her posture stopped me. The streetlight flickered once, like it was about to burn out. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "If you knew how easy it would be to fall into this, would you still be sitting here?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I was afraid of how certain my answer would be. For 3 days, the blinds stayed closed. No glimpse of her at the kitchen window. No tea on the wall. No soft knock at my door. I told myself she was busy. I told myself I didn't notice. Both were lies. On the 4th day, I saw her in the driveway, phone in hand, keys dangling from her fingers. She was dressed like she was going somewhere nice. I slowed as I came down the steps, but she didn't look up. "Hey," I said. She glanced at me, quick, almost guilty. "Hey. I can't talk right now." And then she got in her car and drove off. That night, I ended up at the cafe alone. Sat at our usual corner table. Ordered her coffee just to see what it felt like to drink it. Bitter, too strong. I left half of it untouched. It was almost closing time when the barista, wiping down the counter, said, "Haven't seen you two together lately." I didn't ask what he meant by two. I just said, "Yeah," and left. The next morning, I heard voices downstairs. A man's, deep, easy. Then hers, lighter than I'd heard it in weeks. I didn't catch the words, but I caught the rhythm, familiar, like they'd spoken this way before. Later, taking the trash out, I noticed a second mug on her table through the open blinds. She saw me looking. She didn't wave. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from her. "We should take some space. I think I've been careless." I stared at the screen, reading it again. Careless. The word dug in, sharp in places I didn't know could bruise. I typed out a dozen replies. Careless about what? I didn't imagine it. Do you want me to stay away? Deleted them all. For the next few days, I avoided the driveway when I knew her car was there. I kept my blinds half closed. I didn't go to the cafe. But I kept checking my phone. Every hour, sometimes more. On the 7th day, I saw her again, through the front window as I was coming home. She was at the table, head bent over something in her hands. A letter, maybe. I thought about knocking. About walking in and saying I didn't care what made this complicated. But I stood on the steps instead, frozen halfway between leaving and trying. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was almost midnight when I heard the knock. 3 short taps. I opened the door to find her standing there, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands, eyes red but not wet. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "You are," I answered, stepping back so she could come in. She moved to the kitchen without asking, like muscle memory, and leaned against the counter. I stayed by the doorway. The space between us felt sharper than it had in weeks. "I've been thinking," she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "About that night on the wall. And about how easy it would be." I waited. I pulled back because I thought I was protecting you. Or me. Or both. I don't even know anymore. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't try to hide it. And then I realized, maybe I was just protecting the version of me I think I'm supposed to be. I stepped closer, slow enough for her to stop me if she wanted. She didn't. "I don't want to mess you up," she whispered. "You're not," I said. She looked up then, eyes catching mine and holding them there. "But if I let this happen, it's not just coffee and banana bread anymore. It's not something we can take back." "I know," I said. We stood like that, breathing the same air, neither of us moving to close the gap. I could feel the weight of every unsent text, every quiet dinner, every time I almost knocked on her door and didn't. "I like my life quiet," she said finally. "Predictable. You're not that." "I'm not trying to be." She gave a small, tired laugh. "You already are." The room went still again, except for the hum of the refrigerator. She reached for the edge of the counter, fingers curling over it, like she needed something to hold on to. And then, slowly, she let go and reached for my hand instead. Her palm was warm, her grip light, like she wasn't sure if I'd hold on. I did. We didn't kiss. We didn't even step closer. We just stood there, holding hands in the dim kitchen, like two people trying to memorize the shape of this choice before it changed everything. After a long minute, she let out a breath she'd been holding. "Okay." Spring came slow that year. The kind of slow where you barely notice the mornings getting brighter until one day the blinds are open, and the room looks different. Her blind still opened at 7:10 a.m. mine, at 8:47. We never talked about that night in the kitchen. We didn't need to. After that, the space between us felt lived in. Some mornings, I'd find her on the low brick wall with her tea, and I'd bring my coffee down without asking. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. There was no urgency anymore, no edge of almost. Just a quiet knowing. On Thursdays, she'd leave banana bread on my step. On Sundays, I'd fix the crooked latch on her back gate without her asking. She'd pretend not to notice until I was done. We didn't become inseparable. We didn't start sharing every part of our lives. But there were small ways we folded into each other's routines. She'd leave the porch light on if she knew I was coming home late. I'd text her if I was at the cafe, just to see if she wanted her coffee black, no sugar. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me like she had that day on the wall, soft, careful, like she was still deciding if she should be here. And I'd think, "You are." One afternoon in May, we ended up walking to the park after the rain. The air smelled like wet grass, and the benches were still damp. We sat anyway. "Do you think about that night?" she asked. "All the time," I said. She smiled, the quiet kind, just one corner of her mouth lifting. "Me too." We stayed until the lights started to go, then walked back in silence. At her door, she handed me a mug, black coffee, and kept her tea for herself. We stood there for a long moment, steam curling into the cool air. "This is nice," she said. "It is." And that was all. No promises. No grand declarations. Just two people who'd found a rhythm that made sense in a world that usually didn't. Months later, when I think of her, I don't think of the almosts. I think of the mornings, her blinds, my blinds, the space between them slowly disappearing.